Welcome to Artistic Adventures. A new series starts today with our Vampira using a live doll, and I'm going to show you how to make resin eyes, and you can use this for lots of different size dolls. So let's get this project started. We're going to use a live doll for this, and one of the reasons we are is because I want to experiment with her eyes. I talked about this some in the last video where, you know, the eyes seem sort of extra because they're kind of straight ahead and starey, and we use some techniques just drawing on the lidded part of the eye for the fairy to diminish the effect of her starey eyes. But in this video we're going to go a step further, and in addition to that I'm going to show you how you can make your own eyes for not just this doll, but for really any doll that uses this shape of eye, like ball jointed dolls or the petite Blythes that I replaced their eyes. I used this technique. So first of all, I had to cut off the doll's head, as you can see. Keep the top because you'll need that. And then the eyes themselves, if you see into there, they're in a little socket that was actually covered with the flesh colored plastic. So I cut that off, that top part off, and then I pulled out the eyes, and the eyes look like that. So they're 10 millimeter I measured, and so I have a mold that has 8 millimeter, 10 millimeter, and I think 12 millimeter. So what I'm going to do is show you how you can use this mold to mix up the white part of this eye, and then we'll also be doing the iris and the pupil because I want to have her have red eyes because she's going to be a vampire. I think she needs red eyes, something really monster looking. Okay, so I'm going to put these aside for now, and we're going to switch over to talking about epoxy and using molds. I got this mold, I believe I got it on Etsy. They do also have them, I think, on AliExpress. If you're really interested, let me know and I'll go back and look up and send you the link. Just let me know in the comments and I'll reply and give you the link. I can look up where I bought it. But there are different types. I do find that this one works pretty well. It's just a silicone squishy mold. So we're going to use a clear epoxy, and I'm going to just use this because I had this and I bought this at Michael's. They're different types. Not sure exactly which one's best, but this one works well for me. I've been using it to make Blythe eye chips, and they've been turning out really well, so we're going to use it for this too. It's two-part. You have the resin, the epoxy resin, and then you have the hardener. And you use equal parts of both, which is really interesting that I've used apparently more of this than that. I don't know how that happens. Anyway, you can also get these little disposable medicine cups on Amazon for pretty cheap. I think I got 100 for like $3 or something like that. And I'm going to mix up a half a teaspoon of each. So I'm just going to take this. Now I have to hold the cup up, so I'm going to be off camera so I can see. I'm going to pour in half a teaspoon of the resin, and then the next mark is a teaspoon, which would mean I'm adding another half of the teaspoon of this on top of it. So I just pour that right on top and go up to the teaspoon mark, and try to be as accurate as possible. Now I'll tell you in the directions for this product, it says stir it for 2 minutes and then pour it into a second container. I don't pour it into a second container because I'm using such a small amount. I'm pretty sure that I'm getting it mixed, and I haven't had a problem with that, and I've used almost the whole 2 bottles making different things. So as you're stirring it, you'll see that there are, when you first start stirring it, you'll see little sort of pearlescent strands as you stir, and then after a while you'll see that it becomes clear. So you want to stir it until it becomes clear. Now you will see bubbles in the epoxy. That's really sort of unavoidable. It's really hard to not get bubbles, although I guess if you were really talented you could. You'd have to stir it really slow. This particular brand, the bubbles are supposed to rise to the top, and then if you still have bubbles that haven't popped, you can run a lighter over them and they pop really easily off the top of the epoxy. It's harder to see it when you use the clear, but I mean when you use it with a color, but what you can do is just sort of let it set a while. I mean, even if you let it set a minute, it's like the bubbles tend to come up to the top. So it works pretty good. It does have to cure overnight though, so it's not going to be a fast craft. So I just try to make sure I get in all the corners, and I run around on the edges. I'm just using the end of one of my paint brushes because I don't want to waste money on popsicle sticks just for this. And it works. So what I do is just keep a paper towel handy and rub off the epoxy as I do it. Now, talking about ways to color it, I'm going to tell you things so that you don't make the same mistakes that I do. The liquid pigment, if you put too much, your epoxy will not cure. And for the white, it's okay because you really don't need more than like a couple drops to color this amount. The black, however, I was trying to use to make pupils for my midi Blythe eyes, and if you just put a couple drops, it turns it gray. So I had put like a whole bunch of it to make it black, and then my pupils never set. If you have a problem, if this is all you can get, and you're trying to use the black, putting it in I put it in the toaster oven on just warm and let it set. It does help it set a little bit more. This is not a product that air dries. It's a chemical reaction. It cures. Doesn't need to be exposed to the air, so it's not that type of product. It's not like glue where, if it's not exposed to the air, it may not dry. So, just to give you a little bit about the properties. Now, I just keep one of these clickers handy, and then after it sets, I just do that, and that popped all the bubbles that were sitting on the top very nicely. So I am going to use the white for this part of the eye because it's kind of a flat white. If you really want to do colors with epoxy, these powders are much better for coloring. They don't affect the cure rate at all, and they can make really, really pretty products if you want to do some things like that. Like, there's all kinds of things you can do with epoxy. Now, I didn't really like this for the white of the eye, which is why I'm not using it, even though I like the product better. It's a little bit too pearly, too iridescent. This is flat, and since I don't have to use that much of it, I'm going to use the liquid for this. So I'm just going to put like a squirt, and that's it. And then we're going to mix it again. And like I said, the white for some reason works much better than the black and makes a nice opaque product. And there may be a better quality product. This is Cast and Craft, which is the same brand as the Easy, whatever that's called, Easy Cast, as the epoxy. So that was one of the reasons I got it. I figured that products from the same company would work best together. Yeah, I don't know about that black, just didn't work. Alright, so we've got that mixed up. Now, there's several ways you can do this. I've actually had a lot of luck just picking up a drop on my end of, see, now I'm not going to have good luck, on the end of my paintbrush and letting it drip down in there. You could pour it into a bigger area, like you might could pour it into these bigger eyes, but you can't pour it into the smaller sizes. It's just not going to work. So you could do it that way. Also, you can buy these little small disposable droppers from, I got mine, of course, from Amazon. And then you can put drops into molds. So that works. That's another way to do it. I'm just going to keep doing it like this. And you just want to make sure that you get it in all the crevices, that it's going down into, all the way down into the bottom. And like, if sometimes maybe if you poured it on the top and didn't let it get into the bottom, you could have a bubble down there. So I kind of put it on the side and then let it slowly flow into those areas, and then slowly build it up to where you don't see the green showing through. On this particular mold, it doesn't matter that it's going to like dome up over the top. It does on the Blythe mold. You want them to be flat, but for these it really doesn't matter, because there's not going to be anything behind the eye that would be obstructed if you made it a little bit thicker than it would be if it was flat. And if you put a blob on the side or something, don't worry about it, because it'll dry and then you can pull it off very easily after it's dry. If you start trying to clean it, like this piece right there, if you start trying to clean it, you're just going to make a mess. And then the other part that's important is you want to make sure that where you're letting this dry is level. Otherwise your eyeballs are going to be sloughed off to one side. So you don't really need the eyedropper. Sometimes it comes in good if you want to get into a small space, but you don't really have to have it. So there we go. There's our mold filled. Now we're going to set this in an area that's very level and let it dry overnight, and then we'll come back and pop these out and continue with the project. Okay, so this has cured overnight, and we're going to pop them out and see how they turned out. So you can see they have the round hole in the center, and the color looks good. They pop out really easily out of this mold, fortunately. So I have 8mm, 10mm, and I think these are 12mm. And these I could actually use for my petite Blythe, because they have 8mm. If you want to replace their eyes, they're 8mm. These I'm going to use for the Live doll, for our Vampira doll. And then these I'm going to save, and I don't know, I may start making some eyes for my Etsy site. I'm not sure. It depends on how these turn out. So, my idea for Vampira is to do glitter, some red glitter for the background for the iris, because I want it to look kind of a little bit spooky, freaky, and then use have a black pupil. Now I'll show you what I do for pupils. I roll little polymer clay balls in different sizes and bake them. So I have small, medium, and large. And when I say that, they're all different sizes, but I do try to get two that are alike, so there's usually a pair that's about the same size. Okay, so I'm going to be using this diamond glaze. If you've never used this, it dries pretty fast and it dries clear. It can almost be used similar to an epoxy, but I think the epoxy is a little bit clearer. So I just want to use this to do the initial setting of the glitter and the eye and the pupil, because I want it to dry fairly fast so we can add the epoxy for this video. So I'm going to put that in there and kind of move that around. I don't want to put too much because it takes up room in this tiny little eyeball. So I'm just spreading it around in the eye, and then I'm going to use some glitter. This is a kind of a reddish glitter. I'm using that because I want her eyes to be a little bit crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like a monster. So I'm putting that in there. I tried to use some of the smaller pieces. This has kind of a mixture of small and large pieces. And with this little scoop, you can kind of dig out the smaller pieces. The scoop came with some powder tint that I got for epoxy. It's really cute, isn't it? And you use it to scoop out the powder tint. Alright, so I've got the glitter in there, and now I want to put the pupil in. Let's see. I'm gonna drop that in there, and then what I want to do. What I want to do is try to get it in the center of the eye, and then push it down a little bit so it's attached with that diamond glaze to the glitter. And after I did that, I realized I think I'm gonna try to put more glitter in there. I think it needs to be more up on the side, so what I'm gonna do is, this is hard working with these little small areas. If you put too much of this diamond glaze, you don't have any room for the epoxy. So I'll just try to put some of that in there using the tip of my tool so that it comes up all the way on the sides. I had it down at the bottom, and I thought that would be enough, but when I looked at it with the pupil in, I think it really needed to come up on the sides too. So I'm just sort of patting that on there. And if you get it on the outside, don't worry, because you can use acetone to get that off. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to rub the glitter off of this in case I don't get it on the right side when I put it in there. And we'll pop that back in to the center. And then I'm going to work on this other one a little bit. Let me see if I can get the glitter off of this before it dries. So once again, just sort of positioning that diamond glaze on the upper part, and then we'll see if we can get this to stick to it. And that looks pretty good. And now we'll put in this pupil. Press it down. This one's being ornery. There's always one. Okay, so I think we got them in the center. Make sure they're flat so that they don't roll. Alright, and then we're going to let that dry and we'll come back to it and then put the epoxy in later. Okay? Alright, so we have our eyeballs that are dry now, and I want to put some more epoxy in them. And oh, by the way, did you notice I still have these nails on? Can you believe it? I can't believe it. Anyway, so I want to be really careful here because I want to make sure that I don't get it all over the place. So I'm going to take little tiny drops and drop it in there and let it set. Dropping it over to one side. Hopefully I don't move the pupil. I'm hoping that's stuck in there now. Although you can never tell. If you don't want to mess with epoxy, you could probably do this with the diamond glaze. I'm not sure if it would be exactly as clear, but especially with these smaller areas, I've used it more with polymer clay and it works really well. I've done some things that sort of look like cabochons where I put that and let it dome up. Now this is getting some bubbles on the top. I want it to dome up, but before I put any more in, I want to get rid of those bubbles. So I'm just going to quickly run the flame over it. And they pop pretty darn fast, which is good. So you might want to let that settle because it's going to settle into the glitter. And then kind of look at it from the side. You don't want it to be concave. You don't want it to be going in like this. You want it to be more domed. If you can get it to that point without it spilling over, that would be great. So maybe just another little dab on each one. Give it another look. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to keep an eye on it. If it looks like it needs more than say 30 minutes or so, I'll put a little bit more if this is still fluid. This does get more viscous or thick. It doesn't really harden though until overnight, but when you're doing this step you want to use fresh epoxy so you make sure that it flows into all the little crevices, and also that it's easier for it to dome up with it when it's thin. I see more bubbles coming up, so I'm going to pop those. It doesn't hurt the silicone or the epoxy for it to be hot like that. Alright, so we're going to let these dry overnight and then we'll come back tomorrow, finish this video, we'll put them in the doll and see how they look. We'll probably pull them right back out though until we do her face up. I'm not sure. We'll see how it goes after I put them in, if I want to leave them in or not. And then we'll move on to the rest of the series with our Vampira doll. Okay? Stay tuned for tomorrow. Okay, so we let the eyes dry overnight and this is how it turned out. Let me see if I can get it in focus for you. You can see the glitter a little bit, and you can see how the top looks from the side. It domed up a little bit. I'll try to get a picture of this with my camera as a still picture too and see if that shows the details a little bit better. But anyway, I'm happy with how they turned out, and I'm going to put them in the doll. I already put one of them in. These fit really well. So 10 millimeter is a great size. And I'm going to have her look into the side, which was one of the things I wanted to be able to do when making my own eyes for the doll. You can't do it with the eyes that she came with just because of the way they're shaped. So these eyes are going to look great for a vampire doll with the glitter. You can see the glitter a little bit. I hope I can get a better picture than this. But anyway, This does show you how to make your own eyes if you're looking to make some, and if you get the the mold, you can make any size that you want, and it's really fairly simple. The glitter was easy to do. Now you can also paint the background different colors if you want to put a more natural looking finish than glitter. And you can also use these for your BJDs or your petite Blythes, or really any doll that has this sort of eye mechanism in them, this sort of rounded look. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. In the next video, I'm going to be working on her face up, and I'll probably take the eyes out for that. So here's a still picture, a little close up to be able to see the glitter a little bit better, and the red. And then here's another picture of the eyes in the doll's head. So can't wait to see how this all turns out. I think it's going to be very interesting when we do the face up. So stay tuned. We've got lots more coming with this doll. Lots of interesting ways to do things. So if you haven't already, be sure and subscribe. I don't want you to miss a thing. And stay tuned for next week. Thanks, and bye.